Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee. I have 7:11. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you could remain standing for a brief moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. You may be seated. Sometimes that moment of silence is my favorite time of the day. It's like a quiet silence. Moving on, Mr. Levis, if you could notify the public of the emergency exits, please.
Sure. In case of emergency, there are exits to the rear, to your right and left. If you exit the doors and once you get out to the foyer, you either take a left or a right to the outdoors.
And Mr. Florio, if you could read the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Coventry Public Schools, with community partnerships, educate, inspire, and motivate students to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. And just to inform the public, the school committee had an executive session starting at 6:30, and we went to about right now. And we discussed homeschooling requests. We approved minutes from our executive session, and we discussed the timeline for our superintendent evaluation. There were 2 votes taken. Both were 5-0, one for the homeschooling request and the other for the executive session minutes on 9/27/18. That being said, is there a vote to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42-46-4 and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the approval of our open meeting minutes from 9/27/18. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the open meeting of 9/27/2018 as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to personnel, our reference number 2. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to anything here?
No, just as stated.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the resignation of Ken Bird?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the resignation of Ken Bird, head boys hockey coach at Coventry High School, effective July 27, 2018.
July 22nd. I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the resignation of Joshua Burnham.
Madam Chair, just one question. 7/22/2018 date, is that correct?
I believe it is, yeah. It was this summer. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the resignation of Joshua Burnham, assistant wrestling coach at Coventry High School, effective October 11th, 2018.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to certified appointments. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to any of these?
No, just as stated.
Is there a motion from Megan O'Hare?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Megan O'Hare, 1 year only, .6 inclusion teacher at Hopkins Hill Elementary School for the remainder of the 2018-2019 school year.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the appointment of Stephanie Sullivan. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Stephanie Sullivan, 1 year only, .4 inclusion teacher at Tioga Elementary School for the remainder of the 2018-2019 school year.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to classified appointments. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to these? Okay, is there a motion to appoint Evan Boscos?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Evan Boscos, 6.5 hour day TA, Teacher Assistant Intensive Support, CLA program at Allen Shawn Feinstein Middle School, effective October 15, 2018.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the appointment of Carol Cole. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Carol Cole, 4-hour day Teacher Assistant Intensive Support, CLA program at Allen Shawn Feinstein Middle School, effective October 15, 2018.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Before we move on to coach appointments, are there any those certified appointments? Is anybody here from that or from the SRP? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to coach appointments. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to this?
No, as stated.
Is there a motion to appoint Paul Nato?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Paul Nato, head boys hockey coach at Coventry High School, effective November 26, 2018.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And finally, moving on to Jason Martin. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Jason Martin, head girls basketball coach at Allen Shawn Feinstein Middle School, effective for the 2018-2019 season.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Are either Paul or Jason here? No? Okey-dokey. Moving on to the public agenda, the remainder items on our agenda are open for public comment. If there is a vote involved and the committee makes a motion to vote on a particular item, then we put that out to the public before we actually take the vote. That being said, we can move on to, I don't think there's a celebration, so number 7. Is not going to be discussed. We can move on to number 8, which is the discussion and approval of the interim principal high school leadership team. And I assume, Mr. Levis, you're going to take that.
Sure, yes. It's reference 5 in your packet.
Yep.
I know that, but just to point that out. First, I want to start off by thanking Ms. Andrews for being the interim principal over there. And so Monday, I expect you back 6:30 and in the office, okay? But I really also want to thank the high school, when I say leadership team, not just the administration, but all the teachers and the support. This is only the beginning of my 3rd year. And we've had a lot of adversity. I mean, just how we ended last year, I can only speak for myself, and I'm sure, I could probably speak for many individuals. It was a challenging time in terms of elimination of positions. The high school, we eliminated, I think, 13 positions at the high school, 21.6 district-wide. I think we may forget it today, but I remember that heat wave we had in the beginning of the year. It's just one thing after the other. But having said all that, I think the feedback that I received from many people in the high school is it's one of the best starts that they had. And I attribute that to the high school individual, the teachers, all the support staff, but especially the leadership team. And we talked a little bit about this last school committee meeting that, tonight was going to appoint an interim principal. But what I want to highlight too is that when this came about in terms of there were no recommendations put forward by the interview committee for the principal, met with the high school administration and bless you, and said, let's come up with want them to come up with a plan. It's easy, in my experience, superintendents hire somebody, typically a retiree, to come in and maybe that works well for some places, but we have a lot of work to do. The high school team, the leadership team, the administrators have been working extremely hard on the NEASC, our NEASC visits coming in spring of 2020, so next spring. There's a lot of work that's been done. You'll see in our presentation that is going to be in a couple of minutes. You'll see a lot of the work that's been done that will highlight connected to the strategic plan. But I want to thank them for all the work that they've done. And what I'd like to do tonight is, continue that work. And I think the plan that we're putting forward, that they put forward, that I support, that, we've met as a central office team to make sure that we can feasibly support this, that we can fund it. I want to thank them because they came up with it. And it helps us with the NEASC. It helps continue the momentum. And again, there's, most of the people are still the same individuals there. So, it's the energy, it's the professionalism, the commitment, the passion that people have put together, and we want to support that. So what I'm asking tonight is I'd like to appoint Brooke Maycumber as the interim principal, and this is through the end of a 2018-2019 school year. We will be going back out to interview again, and we haven't really addressed that timeline yet, but we're going to look, probably after the holidays, and at a time where most individuals that'll be looking for a principalship would be willing to apply, and we're going to go back out. And I would encourage Ms. Maycumber to apply for that. We're going to keep the same. Mr. Chase is the assistant principal. Ms. Ferguson is an assistant principal, but also the high school leadership team has really helped her allocate more of her time to the CT. We know how important that is, and to do due diligence and fairness. A position we're going to create, and this is with the support of the CTA, we're going to create a position called the Director of Student Service, and that would be for Ms. Donna Bodwin. And you see, I put in there, again, they've identified the different roles and responsibilities. So it's going to be kind of a quasi-administrator. Donna's not a certified administrator. She's working towards that. Before the year ends, I think she'll have her emergency certificate. However, this is going to allow us to really address both the NEASC concerns around guidance, and Donna's going to be taking on numerous responsibilities that'll continue to move forward. They've also reorganized, but I didn't share that. That's their responsibility to look at the different roles that Mr. Chase will take on, that maybe Ms. Ferguson. And so I'm asking you to approve that position through the end of June 2019. And then the third move is Ms. Joyce Windrow. We're going to move Joyce out of science into guidance for the remainder of the year. And you'll see that we're also going to replace science with teachers that are currently teaching science. I mean, we don't have the luxury, many schools, and I know, we'll be doing that also, but using sometimes subs. But with the science, it's very difficult to get a full-time science teacher to come in mid-year. But B, I think we owe it to the students that are in those courses to give that high-quality instruction that we know our science teachers have. And again, the numbers we put in there are the most that it would cost in terms of covering those. It could come out much less than that. I think this is an incredible plan. They put a lot of effort into it. I fully support it. I hope the committee will support it. Again, this is not like a second-class plan or just getting us through. This should continue with the work. And I applaud the entire high school. Like I said, they're behind this and the support. And I really want to thank Ms. Maycumber and Mr. Chase and the rest of the leadership team, but for really stepping up to the plate. But really, Ms. Maycumber, because it's different. When you're the principal, even though you've been doing a lot of responsibilities, it's going to be different. And our job in central office is to support you and ensure success. So that's the plan. I hope, again, that, if the committee has questions, individuals are here that can answer some questions for you, but I hope that you'll support this plan and help us continue to move forward and really prepare for NEASC. I know there's a lot of concern around budget time around NEASC, and rightfully so. There's a lot of things that we need to work on, but they've been doing an incredible job. I think people were very impressed with it started off with Mr. Chase's presentation, doing that crosswalk between the changes in NEASC. We're going to be, I think, the second school, I believe, to go through that new process, so it's not like we can really learn from anybody else. So there's a lot of work on their part, but I think this allows us to continue. So I know I've talked a lot more than I should have, but I'm very proud of the work that individuals have done, and I want to support it 100%.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the rest of the committee, does anyone have any questions about this plan? Mr. Florio?
No.
Ian?
Well, I'd first like to say that Mrs. Maycumber is a highly respected member of the, excuse me, It was a very long day, but that's no excuse. She's very highly respected among the high school staff and among the whole school community. So I am very, very thrilled that she has been willing to step into this position. I think it will be a little bit difficult to take off her vice principal hat on Friday and step in as principal on Monday. But we want you to know that we're all there to support you, and we want you to be very successful. So thank you.
And then I just have to say, Miss Maycomber, thank you very much for stepping up and taking on this responsibility. I think you'll do a really good job. And Donna, no one works harder than you. Congratulations.
Mr. Pearson?
Looks like a solid plan. Let's hope it's very successful.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it's very successful as well. And again, I want to thank all of the people involved, Mrs. Maycomber, Mrs. Bowden, and Tim Chase for being part of this leadership team. I don't know if Laurie's here, but I know she's part of the leadership team as well. I think we're very lucky to have outstanding people that can change their hats sort of kind of in midstream. This is what you signed up for when you started this academic year. So we really appreciate it. And hopefully this is going to give us some insights perhaps in a different kind of position, the student services director. Maybe something that we will continue, who knows, if it works out and we see some interesting aspects of that position. At any rate, thank you so much for stepping up, and I know you as well as the rest of the high school teachers, everyone involved. And finally, but not least, Laurie, thank you for stepping up as well. It's not easy to hire a new principal in July, so you know, it was a difficult situation for us to try to get someone. It's just not the right time to be looking for a principal because pretty much everybody has figured out where they're going to go if they're going to change their jobs. So we really, truly appreciate that. That being said, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Brooke Maycomber, interim principal at Coventry High School through June 2019.
It's not written very well, that motion.
I second the
problem.
motion.
Before we move the vote, is there
I'll
any?
take credit for that.
Is there a motion on the, before we make the vote, is there any comment from the citizens gathered, or any, whatever? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Brooke. Yeah, just put,
Yeah, I did. Okay. I did.
when we're done with these three, we'll have you guys come up and shake our hands. That being said, is there a motion on Donna Bowden?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Donna Bowden, Director of Student Services at Coventry High School through June 2019.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee on this one? Any comments from the citizens gathered? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Donna. And finally, Joyce Windrow. Is she here? No? Okay. Good, because we didn't thank her. So. You can send our thanks to her after. Is there a motion to approve Joyce?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Joyce Windrow, guidance counselor at Coventry High School through June 2019.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Any comments from the citizens? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. And if our two newest administrators could come forward, or / quasi-administrator?
Still in the union, Kathy, you don't have her yet.
I know. I said quasi after I said it. I said
Quasi-union.
yeah, whatever.
Congratulations.
You're a wonderful person. Good to have you.
You think, it's the one around saying, no. Did you guys want to say anything?
No, I.
Put you on the spot.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, I think that, I wish Tim were up here with us too, because.
Yeah, Tim, come on up, you're part of the
But,
leadership team.
You know, you talk about a really good start to the school year, and we have had a really good start to the school year, and I just want to say how much work Tim Chase has done. I mean, just his vision alone for this year for our PD and how we started up the year, he's been amazing, and there's no one better than Donna, you know, so when we thought about how to proceed and go forward, it was like, we have to use people who really understand the school and know the culture and know the people, and our leadership team, the curriculum coordinators, the teachers, they've all stepped up. It's been really an amazing year so far. So we're looking forward to it. We know it's a lot of work, but I definitely think it's the right people in place. So
Great,
thank you for going with the plan.
great. We're behind you, so
you.
just reach out to us if you have, I'm sure you're going to have issues. And finally, I did want to thank the, I think it's the science teachers that are taking the extra work on. That's always, you know, a difficult challenge, and we appreciate them being another 0.2, I think it is, or something. So we do appreciate that, because that kind of throws their lives in disarray as well. So we appreciate that, and please let that get back to your science teachers as well. So great. So, we'd like to wait on the number 9 strategic plan and do number 10 first, Director of Finance report, if that's okay with the committee? Yes? Okay.
Certainly is.
Welcome back. We hope you're feeling better.
I am much better this week.
Mm-hmm.
This is still on there. Okay.
And I apologize for not sending a get well card.
That's all right.
I thought
probably
about it
read
several
right
times, and
away
it
anyway,
completely
so-
went right by me.
Yeah.
And then I almost wrote to you today an email and just said, welcome, or whatever, and then I got too busy to even do that. So
That's
please
okay. I'm here. I'm
know
back.
that we all were worried about you and glad you're okay.
Thank you.
Now get to work.
So you have a report in your packet
Yes.
tonight. I can go over some of this. The key is that all of the staffing adjustments from the previous 2 meetings and the changes tonight are included in this. So some of the adjustments I went through just to give some bullets as to where some of the bigger changes are.
Yep.
On the revenue side, some of the offsets, we're supposed to get a $30,000 increase in our state aid. That
Yep.
came out over the summer. It hasn't been officially approved yet. So we're rolling with it as that guidance came out from RIDE, but we won't really know until it's voted on. The other big item, I had talked about this a lot during the budget season, was our career and tech tuition rates. They were
Yes.
significantly higher than
The
most
rest.
CTEs around the state.
Yep.
So in the budget process, I had proposed dropping it down. Based on the constraints that we have now, I don't want to drop it as low as I had initially anticipated, but I think other districts will still see an offset, and it will still put us in the ballpark of other tuitions. So as of right now, I'm looking at an out-of-district rate of $16,500, except for new students. New students have to follow
The new
the
one.
career and tech guidance, so those new students will be calculated based on their sending district's rates. So the last 2, the use of fund balance, this again is more of a formality. The first one, we had already talked to last school committee meeting about committing the $200,000 as a chunk of money towards the Aramark balance. I anticipate coming back as soon as I get final information from Aramark, which I am still actively pursuing, and don't have that final information from them yet. But I anticipate it coming back in around 200,000 as well. So that will be that full commitment of 412,000. It'll really be a wash, so we'll be using our fund balance to pay that expense. The bottom one is the $59,510. That is essentially the budget gap that we have right now. So I believe that we should have enough fund balance to draw that down, to use the $59,510. So as of this point in time, I'm not reporting a deficit to the state, because my projections that we'll use that $59,510 of fund balance. It is very, very early in the school year to be looking at all of these changes. On the expenditure side, one of the big offset, I'm jumping down a little bit, is the propane. We did switch
Yeah, I saw
propane
that, yeah.
companies, and it's supposed to be a significant savings. that will materialize in the winter once we start receiving those actual bills. And it'll also depend on the weather this winter. If it's a very cold winter, we might not experience as much of the savings. So again, these are my best estimates as of right now. As far as transportation, all of that, I feel like we're adequately budgeted in all of those areas, so I don't have any concerns there, assuming everything continues on. Purchase services, though, the out-of-district tuition, this I think is important to call out because this is the first time that I'm actually projecting our out-of-district tuitions not related to special ed to exceed special education out-of-district costs. That's a very tough thing to see in here and stay because we work very hard to service as many kids in-house that we can to keep those special ed costs down while keeping the students in their community and meeting their needs. Then the other out-of-district tuition costs, we need to start looking at how we can control those and what we can do. Picking on the one district that we have a lot of students going to, as of right now, it's looking like we're going to pay $540,000 to Foster Gloucester for about 33 kids. So that's a lot of money that's going out of district, and it's hard to really improve your own programs when you're sending that out. So I think at a future time, this might be something that we really need to look into, see what are our avenues to look to try and control those costs, whether it be here or moving forward at a state level. On the salary side, I have everything accounted for. The one area of concern that I have on the salary side is the substitute costs. We went significantly over budget last year in our sub costs, and while I did increase it, and we did make some contractual changes that hopefully will help contain those, but if we run into issues finding subs again, that's an area that if we start accessing more retirees and whatnot, then that subline could go up as well. So given all that is going on, looking at about $59,000 deficit right now in very early October is not a horrible place to be, but I'll have a better idea once we get more into the winter around the December, January. I did mention about the school lunch. That is something that we want to get settled and move forward. I've requested again all the final information regarding the final bills, final inventory, and they did take all of their documentation with them. So we need some of that documentation back in order to get through our audit, and we're also having a RIDE school lunch audit in November to add to our federal grant audit in November.
Nice.
So we're trying to work to get all of that back. So I do not anticipate coming back to you requesting more money for Aramark until all of those items have been received.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah from the committee members?
I do not have any questions.
No, we're all good. Mr. Levis, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank Sarah for, I know she had a, horrible time and, being a young mom and on top of, the heavy lifting that takes place here. But, without her support, and I can say that about all of our staff supports that, but especially with the finances, knowing that where we've come from in the situation, and having a, whether we like it or not, but having a real clear picture, and a clear picture early on where we stand right now, I think is so important moving forward, getting ready for the budget process. All this work's being done, and we know in a couple of weeks we're going to start preparing for FY20. So I just want to, again, thank her. And I know the community, not just the committee, but I know the community sees the benefit of what's been taking place with us, in terms of financially. And she's been a big part of this, looking at, school construction or anything that we're doing with RIDE in terms of the necessity for school construction. She's been a major force behind that. So I just want to thank you publicly for that.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. Were there any questions from the public before we move on this agenda item? Seeing none, we can go on to what is our agenda number 9, which is the strategic plan data review. I think that must be Mr.
So it's
Wood and company.
Mr. Don Coward, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Mrs. Erin Coyne, Professional Development Coordinator, and Mr. Fred, our Dr. Fred Schockhart, our Assistant Special Ed Director. And I just want to thank them up front. They've done an amazing job pulling data from a lot of different sources. They have, very complementary expertise. And before we get started, I just wanted to kind of frame that we've talked a lot about the strategic plan, and there's been a lot of work that's gone on since the plan runs from 2017 through 2020. And the first part of the plan is really this last year, and even into this year, has been a lot of fact-finding information. And I know at some point, and you'll see we're starting to get there, but by the end of this year, we'll be very granular. And I think you'll have some really good benchmarks and some measurements. I think it's sometimes when you point out a problem to someone and you don't have a solution, it's almost abusive. When we say this is a problem, this is a problem. And I think what's important with our strategic plan, the work, and again, while they're presenting this is the work that our entire school community has done. We're focusing on tonight, we're going to focus on predominantly the academic component. And we know, though, that the academics are not a standalone. Then we look at social emotional learning. We look at our facilities. We look at our funding. It's all interrelated in terms of how it improves and how we use it to align, to put that laser beam focus on student performance. So this is a process. We'll be coming back the next school committee meeting and focusing on some of the other components of the strategic plan. So I just wanted to kind of frame tonight, and again, there's a lot of information there. It's overwhelming. I will share with you a live link to this after. That'll have a lot of connections, a lot of links to data. And again, if you don't have all your questions tonight, or if it's overwhelming, we'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll do a follow-up presentation. And we plan on doing this ongoing. But again, I want to thank the entire school community, because this is a compilation of all the work that everybody has done. So that's my piece here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cowart.
So this is pretty exciting. Typically, I'm agenda item 13 or 14. Today, this item was moved to number 9.
You're the last item. Last item,
Came
though.
out to cover my presentation. That doesn't happen often. So
Must be succinct.
yeah. So this is amazing. So and I think what I want to make sure I say off the top is that there is a lot of information on these slides, and our thinking was we're not going to sit here and read the slides because that's just a poor way to present. But we wanted the presentation to have the information, so if people refer back to it, it was there for them to read. So it's in the packet that you have, and like Craig said, we're going to have a link online so people can go back and look at it. The first slide that we put on the presentation was.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Don.
Tilt it to you?
No, we have this packet, but many people.
So I can turn it that way?
Yeah, I think so, because that way people in the audience will be able to see it. We can look at our packet.
There may be some additions, so that's why, we'll make this live, and I'll have Mr. Murphy will help. We'll make sure we get this on our website, but we'll also share the link, because I think since we printed this up, there's been some changes that have been made too.
Slight changes, nothing significant.
No.
Added a few links and things.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get going here. So I think what we're gonna try to do going forward is every time we do a presentation like this, we're gonna put the strategic plan right up front so people can see how we're linking our work back to the strategic plan. So our first area in our plan has to do with curriculum. So what we did is essentially talked about how we're gonna align all of this discussion today around curriculum. So what the program innovations are, what's the instructional innovations, and how we're gonna address every child having a champion, because that's language that's embedded in our strategic plan. The next slide, Fred, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So today we're going to focus on the top part of the cyclical process of inquiry. It also shows that what we're doing at central office, we don't do it in isolation. We have to work together with all the other components of our educational system. So today we're going to focus on central office level, but keep in mind that actually throughout our presentation we're going to make links with the next steps is reviewing administrators, so that analyses can also take place at a building level and more at the student, the granular level, whereas at central office we look more for trends and patterns from a holistic perspective. Then that analysis automatically leads to recommendations and initiatives, which then ties back to the budget process and the strategic plan. 3 components that we're going to highlight today is trends and patterns we at central office have discerned so far in the data, We're also going to talk about how we look at different data sets to make sure that our initial impressions are confirmed based on different sources. And then we're also going to start going a little bit into the identification of some possible causes. But again, today is going to be a bird's eye overview, then it will need to be processed at the school level.
And often during our conversations, we would think about what we wanted to include, and every time we had another conversation, the thing was, we should include that, and we should include that. And so this presentation went really big, and then kind of went back small again, because we kept putting more into it, because we felt it needed to be said, because it's part of the big picture process that Fred talked about. So often in central office, there are pockets of people, it happens at the building level all the time, having conversations. So we're looking at data, we're having conversations, and when we look at data, we're looking for trends, we're looking for things that are happening in our data that makes us want to pause and make decisions about our instructional practices. We look at the trends, we verify them with other assessments, we try to reference, cross-reference with different data tools, and then we try to review the findings with the staff to come up with solutions to the problem. I will say right off the top, as we go through these presentations pieces, you're going to notice some things that don't look phenomenal. And we're being very transparent because we've identified some places where the data is not going in the direction we like. So the first thing we need to do is identify those things. And then we have to come up with a plan on how we're going to address that. Which is a little bit different than what's been done in the past, because a lot of times those trends kind of went unnoticed. And they kind of just went by the wayside, and every year started like a new cycle. You're going to see a few slides down, we're trying to carry data from one year to the next year to the next year, and we're looking at data by grade level, but we're also looking at data by cohort, like how the kids are moving through all the different grade levels. This is a very busy piece, but what I wanted everyone to see is when we talk about assessment, it means a lot of different things in our district. It means a lot of things in a lot of districts. We have state assessments, which are like PARC, RICAS, SAT, PSAT, those are things that all schools do. We have our own district assessments. I know a lot of people in the audience and the committee know about STAR. We're going to talk about STAR a lot today. We have school assessments, things that happen at the school level that are not necessarily mandated by the director of curriculum, but maybe the principal says, we need to use this data to find out more about students. And then teachers have their own assessments they use in the classroom all the time. So when we talk about assessment data, it's not always just rooted in one piece of state data or even district data. It's coming from a few different places.
Sorry to interrupt. That's
Yes.
a great slide, by the way. Thank you for putting
Yeah,
that together.
it took me a little bit of time to make it because I got one of these template makers and I kind of fiddled with it, and then I made it, and Erin said, "Can you change something?" I said, "No." I can't. That slide can't be changed. I was talking to Dr. Dixon about this the other day, about initiatives, things that happen in our district, and this happens in many districts. When you see problems and you see trends and you see things that you want to address, you start thinking about, well, what's the solution to the problem? What can we do to fix a problem? And that becomes sort of an initiative. Well, when you get initiative heavy, when you do a lot of little initiatives and you're doing them all at the same time, what happens is you can't really measure the impact of the initiative on the problem. So if I have one particular thing I'm looking at, and I pile on 4 different things. Let's say for me, I want to lose weight. So I'm going to exercise, I'm going to diet, I'm going to drink water, I'm going to do 12 different things. And then suddenly I lose weight and somebody says, "How did you do it?" I don't know. I did 12 different things and suddenly the weight was gone. I'm not quite sure what the one thing was. Well, we do that with initiatives all the time. We throw a lot of initiatives onto a problem, but we don't always know what's had the impact. So this sort of, I'm not reading all this, but this basically talks about since 2009, all the different initiatives, and this is not even all of them, these are just the ones we can think of, that we've done in our district. Content specialist model, full day K, there's lots of different initiatives. Some of them had to happen, some of them are things that we just did to ourselves, some of them are wonderful, some of them we don't know yet, because we're still trying to find out what the impact's going to be. So this is still me talking. So curriculum work. So I did this presentation for the folks here a little while back, and this is being adjusted all the time. But we have a curriculum cycle, and the curriculum cycle basically just says what areas are going to be addressed where. You can go to the next one. So up to this point, and it's really only started since last year. This is sort of where we're at in terms of curriculum. In mathematics, we did a lot of work We called it phase 2, which is actually writing of curriculum at the middle school and high school. We had release time for teachers during the day, and then we also had teachers come in during the summer and do work. We did the same thing for science for the middle school and high school. Not all of it's done, but it's very close. Phys ed is done. I told you we were working on that last year. Phys ed is done. It just needs to go in front of the curriculum council and then to the school committee. Health is in phase 2 now. It's being written. Social studies is just starting. And it was amazing because I had a meeting to talk about social studies work, and I had the program supervisors from the high school and the middle school come to me, the curriculum coordinators, and basically talk about what our process, what it's going to look like and what was involved. It's been so long since the social studies curriculum was done. It's been so long since they even had that cross-level conversations. We were having like really meaty conversations about even the sequence of history that we want to cover at each grade level, and if things needed to be adjusted. That's how long it's been since the conversations have happened. And then I'm meeting with Bethany tomorrow to talk about world language. So there's a lot of curriculum work happening. It's all happening in different phases. And to tie into NEAS, I've been helping with the NEAS team because that's one of their goals. And we've been trying to implement some of this timeline data into the NEAS paperwork so that it all ties together. So that's just an update of where the curriculum fits into the initiatives, the assessments, and looking at where we're at.
So MTSS was mentioned a lot in the slide that had the different initiatives that we've had going on since at least 2013. Actually, MTSS, we really used to just call it RTI. That's been around here since at least 2008, I think. But I just put some things that have happened just since 2013 because I think a big piece of that came into it. And for those people that aren't fully aware what MTSS is, it's really a framework of student support using database decisions involving both behavior and SEL and also academic.
And could you just tell us what the acronym stands for, the words?
Multi-tiered systems of support, sorry, yeah. So it's about another slide of the RTI triangle, which we'll come up to in a couple of minutes here, but the big piece that really happened that we're still using STAR. And we began in 2013 screening all students 3 times a year for our universal assessment for screening reading and math in grades K to 10 and reading grades K to 8. That's a big piece, and I'm not going to read all this to you, but I'm just going back and thinking of all the different layers of things that have happened to develop MTSS to get us to where we are today, which is, I think, in a pretty good place. NCII was also a really big piece of that. That's the National Center for Intensive Intervention. They received a federal grant to come and work with us on really looking at intensifying supports for the students most at need. We learned so much from that project that started at Hopkins Hill and moved on to include some other schools. Western Coventry, Tioga, and Washington Oak is involved now as well. We've learned so much from that. And then also the Rhode Island MTSS project, which was a partnership offered to us through the Sherlock Center in Rhode Island College. We learned quite a lot from that as well. It started back in 2015 with central office administrators and professional development coordinators, and then it branched out. We focused in on Tioga School to start with, and then everything we're learning from that, we've had intensive training for 2 years, and everything we're learning with that we're bringing to other places now, such as the Coventry, next slide, MTSS handbook in 2018, and that's a really big piece that I hope you can take a look at later. There's been a lot of work from so many different people, and it's really been a work in progress for, I think, 3 years now, and I think we've gotten it to a really nice place. It's very comprehensive, so that's linked here.
And to jump in for a second, you know, when Erin talks about the different learning opportunities, NCII started in one school. So the staff at that school benefited from that training, and they were able to implement what they learned at the school. Then it moved to another school. And then when the Sherlock Center piece came in, it went to one school. And what we discovered pretty quickly, and we're not a super big district, but we're big enough that we had pockets of people in the buildings that had levels of information that was completely different from other buildings. And when you have that, it becomes very difficult to be unified in your approach because everybody's coming at it from a different place. So one of the things they talked about at the Sherlock Center is, you know, when you're at the end of the race and you're really looking at how you want to do a full implementation of MTSS, how do you scale up to all the different buildings and people who haven't had the opportunity to get the level of training that this school did and that school did? And one good example of that is at the high school, they haven't had the benefit of getting a lot of the MTSS training at all. A lot of it's been very elementary heavy. And so a lot of the work Erin's been doing this year is to get into the high school, to work with the administration, to meet with the teachers, to try to get some of the things that we have been able to kind of cull and decide is really good best practices and give the middle school and high school people an opportunity to access that. So this handbook that she mentioned is our way of trying to store all the information in a place that's easily accessible, that people can get to, and it becomes one-stop shopping for MTSS. So if somebody has questions about something, we're just gonna keep referring people to the handbook repetitively until they just start going to it on their own, and that's gonna be sort of our approach. That way it doesn't have a breakdown when you go between buildings and levels.
And with that, we have some pretty lofty goals. We have long-term and short-term goals for how we want to continue to develop our multi-tier systems of support here in Coventry. And this is taken directly out of page 3 from the handbook. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that. It's very comprehensive, and I'm sure Don's happy to answer any of your questions about the handbook. I think it's, I don't know how many pages now. It gets bigger all the time, the more we learn and add to it.
But it's not unyielding, you know, it's probably 20-something.
Yeah.
And I assume we're going to get an electronic copy of that so the links work? Okay, thanks.
So this is a triangle I mentioned before that I'm just gonna stand up to look at this, because this is really important for you to keep in mind as we go through some of the next slides where we're looking at some student data. The multi-tier system of support is about three big tiers of support, and the universal prevention is about 80%, what we hope that 80% of our students are able to be supported through the core curriculum. And that includes students who are, when we look at STAR data later, who are not at risk. So students who are at or above and on watch should be really in this 80%. And then there should be about 15% of students for who targeted intervention is required. It's for some students that will need some additional support, maybe around 15% should be. And then about 5% should be the kids who need really intensive intervention, which should be just for a few kids.
So when we go through this, if we identify that we have way fewer than 80% of our kids in this area, like we are not in line with what this triangle says you're supposed to be, it points to where your needs are.
Yeah,
So if 80% of our kids are not getting their needs addressed by tier 1, which is the core instruction, then that is a curriculum issue. That's an instructional issue at the core. What every kid in our district gets in the classroom, day to day, from their teacher. That is what this bottom indicates. When you get to the middle and the top, then you're talking about students who are getting interventions that are more aligned to small group instruction, individualized instruction that has more to do with addressing skill deficits. And you can talk about what the interventions look like, or what the groups look like, what the student needs are, and that's when you get the MTSS process gets really sort of detailed, because when Fred was talking earlier, he talked about going from like really big to small. You know, at the district level, we have these conversations about how we need to move the district forward, but we don't have any kids at central office. We don't have any teachers at central office. We just have a lot of data. So how does that big conversation end up impacting this 1 or 2 or 3 students in 3rd grade at Western Coventry School? Like, what is the process to make sure that they get what they need if they're not getting it at the bottom?
So with us being an MTSS district, we are looking at this and trying to look at our data and see how are we falling with the distribution here. So next slide. So this is our STAR map. It's a historical view. I know it's really busy, but it's a historical view of the percentage of students who are proficient just at the benchmark level of 40th percentile or above from all of the years that we've had STAR math given. And the points are the percentage of kids that are proficient in that year. And then the big thicker lines is really what we're looking at. It's the trend line. So it's like where we're going, where we're expecting to go. So elementary is the green, middle school is red, and high school is the yellow line. So they're upwards.
Mind if I jump in
They
for a
didn't start
second?
till 14 in math. Go ahead.
When we go back one slide, that pyramid with the 80, 15, and 5, it is based on what's called 25th percentile, meaning every student whose score is better than nationwide 25 out of 100 students is considered within the 80%. In Coventry, we have higher expectations of our students. We go by the 40th percentile. So when you look at these numbers, that's based on the higher criterion of the 40th percentile as opposed to the pyramid that's based on the 25th.
Right, so these areas that are around 80%, if we added in those kids who we call on-watch kids, who are also not at risk, they're qualified to be in that big 80% section too. These numbers would be higher, but like Fred said, we look at the 40th percentile for a number of reasons. It's recommended as benchmark from STAR. Also, it gives us a little bit more insight about how our kids will be doing standardized testing and things like that. So, yeah, can you go back one second? Sure. So in addition to that, these are only measurements taken at the end of the year. So just for some right now information, I put the fall, where we are right now in the fall. So for example, 78% of elementary students are at the 40th or above in math this fall. So that's why I added that little section.
So this is, I'm gonna go quickly through this, but what we basically do is we look at that graph, we look at the data, and we talk about what our strengths are. So for example,
It's touch sensitive.
There you go. I'll give you an example. At that last graph, you saw the high school line was going up significantly.
Yeah.
So when we look at that, we're like, wow, the high school went from here to here, that's a significant climb. That's a strength. So Erin and I scheduled a meeting with the high school interventionists and the high school math curriculum coordinator and sat down and said, okay, your numbers have been climbing steady every year for the last 4 years. What do you think is going on with that? You know, is it just curriculum? Is it instruction? Is it how you give the test? Is it your relationship with the students? Like, what do you think is having the impact? Because we want to take those things and share them with the rest of the district. And as an aside, one of the things they talked about was having a big impact was actually the relationship with their kids, saying that their kids know that the teachers want them to do well. The kids know that the teachers are there to support them, that they're going to give them the help when they need it, and there's a really good trusting relationship. So they find when the kids take the assessment, they're giving their all because they want to prove to their teachers how they're doing. So that's pretty important.
Can I just say one thing too? And also, if you think back to the beginning slides where we talked about the cycle of inquiry, I know this is a lot of information and more very quickly, but all of this and the conversation we had when we went to the high school, all of that is part of that cycle of inquiry, what we do to really dig into the data and look at that information, because we're always paying attention to that.
So then we look at our takeaways. You know, what are the things that we want to do differently? We think about what we have in place and if it's having an impact. That's when it goes back to the initiatives, and then we talk about what else we can do. So a district level scenario, and I'll go through this very quickly, essentially is, let's say we're sitting in my office and we look at the data and the data is doing something at a particular grade level and we're concerned about that. So we were looking at data and we saw that there was a 3-year pattern showing a trend line that pointed down in mathematics that started at the elementary level crossing into middle school, right around 4th grade. We saw a slight trend going down. We investigated further and we said it's happening between 3rd and 5th. Why is this beginning to tick down? And then we said, well, the difference between 3rd to 5th is slight, but when they go from 5th to 6th, it's more significant. So now we're really looking at why is there a significant drop between 5th and 6th graders. So one of the things we talked about, and then we looked at the PARCC assessment to verify if what we're talking about really is good, solid data, and it is. The PARCC assessment backed it up. And other assessment pieces align with that. So we say, well, the problem seems to be rooted in math fluency and concept development. What do we need to do for those kids from 5th to 6th to keep them from falling down? So one of the things we tried this year is we looked at IXL. IXL is a computer program. We piloted it last year with grades 3, 4, and 5, and then we implemented it this year for grades 3 through 6. So it's a targeted initiative looking to address a specific trend that we've identified. I'm not going to say it's going to fix all our problems, but other districts have used IXL in a very similar way and have had success. So that is sort of like just a glimpse of like the thought process that we go through when we look at some of this data.
And just like we showed you the map, this is the same thing but for reading, and the points again are the percentage of students overall, elementary, middle, and district as a blue, that are proficient as we talked about 40th percentile or above, and then the trend lines are the bold lines, end of year measures, and then this fall, percentages hot off the presses as of like today are right there on the little chart.
So this is the same kind of process. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. We look at our strengths, where are things working really well. We look at the elementary level, for example, that's been consistently growing, especially between K and like 4th, 5th grade, where we have steady growth. We look at star reading at the high school and we see how can we, well, actually, the high school did not do star reading before last year.
That's why it's not on that.
So that's why that data piece
Okay.
isn't there.
I was wondering, I was just ready to ask.
Yeah, so,
It is a small dot in it, which does
Oh, okay.
influence the district line,
All right.
but they only start.
Oh, that little tiny, okay. I see the dot. I didn't see that dot. I was
and
gonna
that's
ask
actually
about
part of the initiative planning as well, because we have had this data that would basically stop in 8th grade for reading. And we're looking at the kids transitioning from 5th to 6th, and we're seeing the transition year being a difficult year. Now we have kids transitioning from 8 to 9, that's a transition year, but we don't have the data in 9th grade to compare it to 8th grade to see what the impact is on their learning. So we started last year with reading at the high school, but I would say, and I think I might have said this earlier, we took that first run at it with sort of a grain of salt, because what we discovered very quickly, and the high school staff was quick to point it out to us, is there was holes in the Wi-Fi at the high school, and what was happening is we weren't getting kids on consistently. Jim Murphy got involved, we were able to address it, but by the time we did the first screening, it was like a month and a half late. But then we tried to play catch up and do the second screening and then the third screening, because we wanted to get 3 data points, because that's how you get the trend line. This year I think is gonna be a little bit better, because now we are gonna have none of those issues that we had
Also, it was
last
a
year.
good run-through experience for the ELA department. They hadn't given that
Right.
assessment before, so we wanted to have them go through the year cycle.
And they're all in at the high school. The teachers in ELA have been in touch with Erin a lot, because now they want to use this information to make some instructional decisions. So we went through this a little bit. So here's another sort of snapshot of what we do. And this was actually very interesting. We, Lori and I'm not sure who else was at the meeting, but there was a state level meeting, and they were talking about this website called Ed Reports. And Ed Reports is a nonprofit organization, and Ed Reports basically rates different programs. They give them a score. And we were looking at the Ed Reports for Journeys, which is our primary program for elementary. And it was kind of average at best. And so the state had provided an opportunity for some administrators to go to the Student Achievement Partners presentation on Ed Reports. And we found that Journeys does okay. There's 3 gateways that they have. Journeys did fine in the first gateway, but got weaker in the second and almost non-existent in the third. So then we went to another training that talked about how you supplement Journeys so that you can get the most out of it. Because we're not in a position right now to go buy a brand new program. We have Journeys. The Student Achievement Partners are saying, here are ways that we're gonna help you supplement what you have to get more out of Journeys. And the biggest problem with Journeys that we discovered, and the teachers will say it, parents will say it, I'll say it, not all the text in Journeys is really good, rigorous, engaging text. Some of it's just not quality. And when you give students text that's not quality, it's hard to engage them into learning that goes with the text. So what the Student Achievement Partners talked about is using quality text with students, culling out what's not good, supplementing it with other activities. So this is something that's sort of ongoing. I met with the elementary principals over the summer about this. We're brainstorming some ways to address the issue so that next year we can really empower the teachers to kind of go the next step. This is super busy. I mean, yeah. This is not a math problem. So, but I want you to see this chart. This chart is essentially on my board in my office. Oh. So this is by grade level. I forgot this section is right. Sorry. Oh boy. Done.
There you go.
All right. So it's K1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And then we have spring of 17, fall, winter, and spring of last year, and then we have fall of this year. And we're comparing grades, we're comparing going across, but the color coding is also comparing groups of kids. So I'll give you an example. So this group of kindergartners right here, this is, I'm sorry to have my back to all of you. This is, wow. Oh, I have an issue. Good thing this is not
Just
on
one
camera.
of them.
I don't want to touch it.
Just touch somewhere else.
All right,
There
thank you. This group of kids
Those guys.
is this group of kids
Yeah.
in first grade.
Got
So this is them here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
It goes to here. We have good technology at this side of town because we don't have this across the street.
We have chalk, though.
We have chalk and chart paper. This group of kids is here, and then this is them now. So these kids had full day K. These kids had full day K. So we're looking, what was the impact on them in K? What was the impact on them in first grade? And now what does it look like for those same group of kids in second grade? And how does that group of kids compare to, let's say, this group of kids? Because that is the full score of 17, that's a full score of 18. It's complex, it's busy, but I guess the reason why we put it up there is we want people to know that
You're looking at it.
we're looking at data in lots of different ways, and we're looking for trends in lots of different places, because we can't fix what's broken if we don't look at the information that's in front of us. And if you look at it just in plain sight, you say, well, that's up, that's down, that's a problem. But maybe it's not, because a cohort of kids may look like they underperformed compared to another group of first graders, but compared to themselves, they might be up 10%. And that's growth, and that's progress, and you want to be able to identify that. So this chart is really just about how we look at the data in a few different ways. And this is just STAR.
And if you think this is busy, come to his office and see it on his whiteboard with stars and bubbles and different color marks.
Because it's done with white erase marker.
So what did you come out with?
So we looked at a few different things, and we were happy with the fall of 18 scores. So without touching anything, if I look at the sixth grade, right? We talked about sixth grade earlier. If we look at sixth grade, in spring of 17, it was 64% reading, 63% math. Jump to spring of 18, it was 66 and 62. So that group compared to this group, it's kind of flat. This group of kids in the fall is already higher than the last group of kids finished in the spring. So we're seeing in this group of kids, is the kids from fifth grade, we see a trend going up. And so when we looked at that data, we were excited because our very first STAR assessment actually shows a significant impact compared to last year's group.
So what about comparing kids to themselves?
That's
That's
what I'm
it, that's
talking
what
about.
those
So this
colors
is the
are.
kids,
All
actually,
right,
compared to
I see,
themselves, they're relatively flat.
Okay.
Right, so compared to themselves, they're relatively flat. We're hoping though, but when I compare them to themselves here, this is where it gets dicey,
Right, because
right?
we're spring.
I could bring my kids.
Looking at
You compare them here, you see growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this, at spring going to the fall, you see a drop off because of summer.
Right,
Yeah, well, that,
And flat truly means that those students are making the same amount of progress that the national sample is making.
Yeah.
okay.
If you look at this seventh grade, I'll just look at math.
Yeah.
40%, 47 in reading, 61, 58, 55,
Gonna get to a laser
65, and then it goes down to, it goes to 65, then it goes to 58. So there's been growth there.
Yeah.
As well.
I'm gonna have my cat give you his laser pointer.
I'm gonna be using this again, I'm bringing chart paper this time. You wanna talk about this, Craig, at all?
Which one?
The Bright Stars?
Bright
one?
Stars, pre-kindergarten.
Yes, yes. So Denise isn't able to be here tonight, but I think we all recognize, we made it part of the strategic plan, just the importance of early childhood, early learning. Deb Tyree's here in terms of the kindergarten. I think we'll talk a little bit about the impact of full day K. I think one of the things, if you look at this side, that's significant is just the growth and the investment that this community's made, and all the staff that support preschool have made. In 2015, you see we were 1-star. And the state has identified, using the Bright Stars. Denise did a presentation with some of the preschool staff on Bright Stars maybe a couple of months ago. I think she did a nice presentation, and about the assessment. Well, so you look at 2015, we were 1-star. 2016 to a 3-star. Well, just recently in June, we received that we are 4-star, which is considered excellent. There's only, a small percentage of programs in the state have 4 or 5 stars. I think what's significant in some of these, and we talk about 2 standards, curriculum, is that we're waiting for approval from a 4 to a 5. So, and also in child assessment, it's also pending another 5. So I think there's been incredible growth. Something else that's exciting is that we've been recently invited by the governor's office to attend a meeting around funding for universal pre-K. Right now, many districts receive funding for that. Coventry is not one of those. And we know how important, we were at a safety meeting the other day. Dr. Dixon was there, Jason Martin, myself, and they talked about just in terms of social emotional learning. Remember, Bright Stars is the whole child in terms of not just academic readiness, but focuses on interpersonal skills, social emotional. And they showed that when there's interventions in families at an early age, just the level of success these individuals have throughout their childhood and their adulthood. So I think we can never lose sight, but we have a great preschool program, and the data shows that. And again, it's been focused on, and a big part of this, the last thing I'll say is the parent component, the engagement piece. The families are a big part of this process. And so we have a lot to be proud of here, and this sets the table. And if we can get into that universal pre-K to have opportunities for all students, I can't imagine the results that we'll see, so.
And speaking of kindergarten, we're gonna keep watching kindergarten closely.
Sure. So the next couple of slides, quickly some snapshots of current projects, bigger projects that we're working on. One of the questions is we want to figure out is what is the impact or the lasting impact of full-day kindergarten. So what you're seeing here is of the past 3 years, the blue was the last year of half-day kindergarten. The orange and yellow are the first 2 years of full-day K. Fall, when the kids come in, so without any instruction, what we see is the numbers are pretty flat, which makes sense because the students are coming into kindergarten, haven't had much formal schooling yet. Where it gets interesting is if we compare winter and spring. The blue band was with half-day kindergarten, the gains that the students made compared to the orange and yellow with full-day kindergarten. So what we're seeing is about 10% more students who are not only at the 25th percentile or the 40th percentile. For kindergarten, we look at the 50th percentile. So imagine, national sample, very high expectations, and at this point, over the past 2 years, winter and spring, we saw a jump from the 60s into the low and to the high 70s, which means that we see a fairly strong, significant, lasting impact of full-day kindergarten. Next slide is just some of the other data sources that we use when we think we can start an exam. Before we make any statements, we always want to compare to at least one, ideally multiple other data sets, just to make sure that what we think we're seeing in one data set is actually truly there. So at the end of last school year, one day Don barges into my office and says, hey, when I looked at the PARCC scores, the statewide testing, he says, I think I noticed some significant proficiency discrepancies between male and female students. He said, I wonder if STAR, different data set, would show a difference, would show a similar or a different pattern. So, long story short, there goes my summer. Aaron, next slide, please. What I did is with
Pink and blue.
You thought mine was bad.
Yeah. With the help of Aaron and Don, what we did is we basically plotted each student's STAR scores by gender. Boys blue, girls pink. We weren't very creative when it comes to that. And we looked at 2 factors. We plotted them along 2 axes. One is how well are they doing in reading? And then the second one was how are they growing? Because we truly want our students to be in the upper right-hand quadrant. Those are students who have very strong scores in reading and are making high levels of progress. Up until haven't really had the ability to pair those two variables. Now, what we are now concerned about and need to explore further is students who have high scores, but we're seeing that they're not making the growth that we would expect them to make. And the students in this quadrant are students who are sometimes flagged as not achieving at a level that we would like them to achieve. But contrary to the ones in the lower section, these students are actually making good gains. So those are students where we know is we figured out exactly what they need to learn. They're still behind, but they're on track to close the gap. So that's something that we did for every student in every grade level in every school for reading. So we're going to come back at a later point and really give you some more information about what we found, because it was some really interesting findings, and gender truly is our biggest subgroup of students, male, female. It's about 50% each, it's our largest group. So what we did notice, quick preview here, is that that our male students don't seem to make the same speed of progress in reading as our female students. So now, going back to the cycle, now we need to go back to the building level, to the building administrators and the teachers, to ask them, when we look at that data, what could be some possible explanations for these trends that we found? Because again, at the district level, we see trends. We need to seek the input of the people who work with kids day in, day out to help us interpret at the student level what the possible explanations might be. And the last slide.
So these are some links of some of the more in-depth data analysis worksheets that I've worked on for my administrators. So just feel free to take a look at some of those, and if you have any questions, please let us know.
We know this was incredibly long. We know it was incredibly busy and there's a lot of information in it. But we also felt that there was nothing that we wanted to leave off the table or out of the conversation, because it's all very important into the big picture. We're probably going to be coming back and presenting each one of them individually. But at this point of the year, at the beginning, as we begin this process of looking at our students and their progress, it made sense to give you as much as we could so that you can see what we're doing. Because I think sometimes the perception is you take this test, but what are you doing with it? And we wanted the school committee to know, we want the public to know that we are doing a lot with it. And we're watching the numbers very closely because we think that's the best way for us to help our students be successful.
Can I just jump in and say, like, our next step is we have a staff meeting, administrative staff meeting before our next school committee meeting, and we're going to take this information and break it down with our principals so that we can look and take some of this information and share so that we can support them in terms of doing this work. And like I said, as we progress through this, we'll get down to that very granular, because that's what it's about. It's really,
Just like we may identify a grade having an issue, a principal may be able to identify within his or her school a particular class and be able to get a subset of kids within the class. I mean, they can get right down to very specific information, better than we can, but this is the starting point.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this presentation and reading through the data before we got here. I wanted those links when I was reading through it. So I will be looking forward to the electronic copy so we can further explore this. Are there any questions from the school committee? Sure, Ann?
Don, as your time permits, I know that we have two different curriculum going in kindergarten, and I'd like to see a comparison of how the students are doing based on the different curriculum. So as your time permits, I'd like to see that data, okay?
Yeah, we could look at that along the way.
Good.
With STAR and some of the other streams that we looked at.
Thank you very much.
I found this very interesting too. I liked where you comparing the students to each other, to themselves. I thought that was very interesting.
And I didn't put that link in here, but I can add that as well.
Thank you.
James?
I'm going to start referring to you as the data science team for Coventry Public Schools. No, this is terrific. When I first started on school committee 4 years ago, we'd have presentations about testing scores and data. And the big piece for me that was always missing in the presentations, that doesn't mean the work wasn't being done behind the scenes, but we were never presented with the information about the continual improvement life cycle. Thank you for using the life cycle word. And so it's nice to see using data to adopt strategies to help children and further their ability to achieve more. It is fantastic. I do have an interesting question, because I think you guys are doing great work. I know you work with other communities to see what they're doing as far as their testing. How do we compare to that? Are we doing more or less, or are we kind of on par now with other communities?
You know, when I talk to other communities about intervention pieces or in programs, I find that we're actually either on par or in some cases better off. I have this vision, and it's probably just, you know, my upbringing, that I always think we're behind. I always think there's more to do. I always think like we're gonna close the gap. What's going on over here? Then I'll go to a meeting and it'll be all the district curriculum people, and I'll sit at the table and I'll start talking about what we have going on and asking them questions, and they're looking at me like, we can't help you because we don't have any of that. Other districts are light years ahead. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There are some districts that they've had the infrastructure in place and they've been moving along. I called around to other districts because I was looking for interventions for high school reading, and a lot of people just said there's not a ton out there if you're looking for a program. You know, you can't necessarily do it that way. Lori and I have talked about that a few times. Sometimes the intervention is not a program. It's, you know, what the kid needs and how you supply support to the student. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Good, thank you.
Don?
Yes.
You can go back to comparing data from different assessments. There you go.
You just went by it, yeah.
There you go. I've noticed there's been a problem for a long time in that area. And finally, you documented it. That it's visible. It's visible at high school graduation. When I think the last male that was on there, his mother, oh yeah, there she is. Her son was the last male to sit on the stage with the school committee. The rest have been all female students. And I think you've hit on something. And I hope you can move forward on
It's
it.
not just a Coventry issue.
I know that.
It's seen that for the state, it's national, but I just
It's college bound, it's
I
everything.
wanna look at it closely, because I think if there's something we can do, we can actually see our numbers jump substantially if we can move our biggest subgroup, which is the boys, into a different category.
Track.
And that alone could have a huge impact on where we're at.
Thank you,
Especially in
Don.
reading.
And thank you, Fred, and thank you.
Thanks. Are there any questions from the citizens gathered? Any final comments from,
Just want to say thank you. I know this has been a
it's a huge
lot of
project.
work, and I appreciate it. And again, this is a representation of the work that everybody that works in our district is doing. And we'll come forward with, there's a lot of work that's been done by finance, a lot of work that's going around facilities, and so we'll be presenting a lot of social emotional. We'll be coming back and doing another presentation to cover those other points. And again, more big picture, we'll drill down to the granular. We'll get there, so.
I know you will, Mr. Levin.
Great, thank you so much for this presentation. It was truly exciting. Okay, I'll get my act together here. We are back on agenda item number 11, I believe, if that's true, and that's the subcommittee updates. Are there any updates from subcommittees?
Yes.
Ann?
This is a brief update. The Superintendent Evaluation Committee, Subcommittee, that's Donna and Ann. We met October 8th to finalize the Superintendent Evaluation schedule and the tools. No other meetings are planned. The Career and Technical Education Committee, that includes Kathy Patno, Dave Florio, Ann, and Lori Ferguson. We met October 11th to discuss the CTE budget, and we also met Rick Schwartz, who is a no-cost consultant to us who is working on some marketing activities with Mrs. Ferguson. Our next meeting is October 23rd to discuss the committee's scope and/or recommendations. And the policy committee, that includes James Pearson, Ann, and Craig. Today, we met today to make comments, to take comments on revisions to the distribution of materials policy. That's it.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ann from other committee members, from the public? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to number 12, which is the superintendent's report. Ms. Levis?
Yeah, so I just wanted to update on the school safety. I want to thank those here. I know Mrs. Andrews, Ms. Mangiarelli helped with this. We had applied with the collaboration with the police department for this COPS COPS grant for some safety improvements to our schools, but we didn't receive it. Actually, only 2 districts in the state, one being Smithfield, received over $400,000, and I believe West Warwick received 30-some-odd thousand. These were federal grants, only 2 districts in the state received them. But I want to thank on the police side for their support. The other thing I want to talk about was the necessity for school construction technical assistance requests. We had a meeting maybe 3-4 weeks ago, myself, Mr. Martin, and Ms. Mangiarelli at the Department of Education with the school individuals affiliated with the School Building Authority out of RIDE, and there were some great recommendations. We also had a consultant from RGB that was there to support us. And so one of the recommendations, we've come before the committee with some of them, that we've requested emergency funds and or at least the ability to access emergency funds. That has to go through the commissioner. But there was also a recommendation for us to access technical assistance. And this technical assistance is a new requirement set forth by RIDE, where we would hire an educational planning consultant that would work with the community, all the stakeholders, large focus groups, and we would look at our current facilities, we'd look at a vision, they'd look at our strategic plan, and look at what kind of facilities do we need moving forward that will serve this community for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's a requirement, and so we'll develop a 5-year plan out of that. And so we've requested that technical assistance. We're probably one of the first districts, I would assume, that have requested that. And if funding gets approved through this bond, then funds would be available. So that would be great, because we don't have the funds. We saw in our report update. But this would allow us to have pay for that consultant and move that process forward. And again, this is a community process. We know it's not the elephant in the room, because we talk about it all the time. We need to look at our facilities, and this community needs to make some decisions especially around some of our elementary schools moving forward. And the other positive piece is that we believe that we were informed. I don't know, again, it was just information. I don't have it in writing, but that there's approximately, if that bond goes through, there's approximately $1 million that Coventry would be eligible for reimbursement. And we've talked before about that pay-as-you-go, so we don't need all that money up front in commitment. In our reimbursement, I believe, could be up into like the low 60s or something %, if we, depending on if we look at the different purposes of space, look at green construction. And so there's a lot of positive, especially in a situation, let's be honest, the reality here is in terms of this community, not just our schools, but the capital has not been available for any of the departments. This construction with the police department / DHS is the first construction since Washington Oak. So this is a first step for us. I mean, we have a lot of paperwork in with RIDE. We haven't received any feedback, but despite our situation, we're still moving forward. And I know Mr. Pearson and I were talking one night after a meeting, talking about putting together a 5-year plan and, setting the course for the future, when both Mr. Pearson and I aren't here anymore, but putting that foundation in place. So I think this is a good first step for us. That's it for me.
Any questions for the superintendent from the committee? Any questions from the public before we move on? Seeing none, we can move to 13, the chairperson's report. I have nothing to report. And finally, to citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that would like to speak? And if you do, please come forward and to the microphone and identify yourself and your address, please, for the record.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Benjamin. My address is 17 Circlewood Drive. My son Elijah plays on the boys hockey team. And the Booster Club paid for me to get AED certified, first aid certified, and CPR certified to stay with them. I volunteered to stay with them in the weight room because we didn't have a coach and they needed an adult. So I did my BCI check. I handed everything to Chuck Jones. So I want to give you guys a face. If it comes across your desk, I'm willing to help them out. The boys, I saw you, I heard tonight that the new coach starts on the 26th. So I don't know if he wants them in the weight room before then. And if he needs someone, he's got me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other citizens? Seeing none, I guess we can schedule the next meeting. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, October 25th, 2018, at 6 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, any opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries 5-0. And is there a motion to adjourn? I have 8:38.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:38 p.m.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Ann. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for attending.